Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is take. And take really is our verb of the week. So this particular verb has so many different meanings and usages. This is part 2 of our examination of this verb. So I have a few additional definitions for you today about how we can use the verb take. The first is to determine something by measurement or observation. Perhaps if you're not feeling well or someone in your family isn't feeling well, you might say, we need to take your temperature, or I should take my temperature. And so that's that idea of determining something by measurement. A second way to use the verb take is to mean to write something down. Many students will take notes when they are in classes. A third way to use the verb take is to mean to make a photograph. You'll hear people saying things like, let's take a selfie, right? And so it's that idea of making or producing a photo. A fourth way you can use the verb take is to mean to subtract. Sometimes as people are learning subtraction, it helps to think about it with this particular verb. You might hear take 2 from 4. So you're starting with 4, you're taking off 2, that leaves you with 2. You might also hear take away, and again, that's used to mean to subtract. Now, it's really important for me to note that these 4 definitions I just shared are not the only definitions that exist for this verb. So if you tune in to parts 1, 3, and 4, you're going to learn some additional ones. So this is just a quick glimpse at some of the usages for take. It's really important that you know that take is an irregular verb. To make the progressive tense, you're going to drop the E, then add ing to form taking. The past tense form of this verb is spelled T-O-O-K and is pronounced took. The participle form of the verb goes kind of back to our base verb, and then we add an N to it, and we pronounce that taken, taken. Okay. So as I mentioned in part 1 of this video, we have so many different phrasal verbs with take, and it's impossible for me to talk about them all and not have 4 or 5 hours of video, but I've tried to pick out some of the more common ones for us to look at and to practice with. So let's start with the phrasal verb take back. And you can see from my notes here, I'm going to have 4 different meanings for just this one phrasal verb. And the first way we're going to use it is to mean that someone is feeling sentimental about something in the past, kind of like, oh, those were the good old days, that kind of feeling. There's a word for that called nostalgia. But when you're using this phrasal verb take back to have this sentimental feeling about the past, we're going to separate it. So take will have an object come after it. Could be a pronoun, could be a name of someone, and then we'll have back. And you can see that in my example sentence. Whenever I hear that song, it takes me back to high school track meets. So I am describing sort of a certain situation. There is one particular song my track team in high school sang so often, played all the time, and whenever I hear it, I think of those happy memories of being in high school and running track. And I should note that it takes me back, that's an example of the simple present there because I'm describing sort of this habit or routine that occurs when I hear this particular song. The second way you can use take back is to mean to retract a statement. So someone says something and it's like, oh, no, I'm sorry, that first statement was wrong. Okay. An example of this, the spokesperson took back his earlier comments blaming an employee for the accident. So here, spokesperson made some sort of statement saying this accident was the fault of this person, and then later said, oh, no, I'm sorry, my first statement was incorrect. Another way to use take back and this is another one we're going to separate and have an object come between, is to mean to resume having a relationship with a particular person. So this is commonly used with dating relationships. So someone might be dating, something happens, maybe they break up, but then eventually they sort of get back together. They resume having that relationship. You can see that in this question. Did he forgive his girlfriend and take her back? So this is an example of a simple past tense question. So we're kind of asking about two parts. Did he forgive? So maybe she said something during an argument or did something hurtful, and they decided, okay, we're going to break up. And maybe something has changed that is going to make them resume their relationship. I'm not sure that I mentioned the previous sentence that spokesperson took back the earlier comments. That is also simple past tense. Let's look at our fourth meaning for take back. This usage is just to return something for a refund. An example of that could be, I'm going to take this shirt back because it just doesn't look good on me. Okay, so I purchased something thinking like this looks great, and I get home and maybe I try it on again and it just doesn't look good, so I'm going to return it and get my money back. The next phrasal verb you might hear is take before. This means that someone is being brought in front of either another person or maybe a group of people for judgment. This typically gets used in conjunction with legal matters. An example of that, he will be taken before a judge later this week. Okay, so will be taken is an example of future, but it is in the passive voice. So that might look a little funny to you, but that's what's going on with there. The sentence before, I'm going to take this shirt back. That's an example of the simple future in the active voice. Let's continue looking at some more phrasal verbs. The next one is take below. This is another phrasal verb that we're going to separate. And it means that someone or something is being guided to either a lower level of a building or a ship. Here's an example of that. The crew has taken the additional supplies below deck. This sentence is an example of the present perfect. The next phrasal verb we'll look at is take by. We're going to look at two different meanings for this phrasal verb. One could mean to hold on to someone or something by grabbing a part of it or them, depending on what it is we're talking about. Let's look at an example sentence. The father took his son by the arm and brought him inside. So kind of this idea of grabbing and guiding the son indoors. Took his son by the arm is an example of the simple past tense. Second way to use take by is to mean to gain control or possession through some means. This is going to be another one where we separate the verb take and the preposition by. An example of this, the insurrectionists took the capital by force. So after that by is coming the means, the way. So here I'm describing what happened on January 6th in Washington, D.C., and this idea of using weapons, threats, etc., that constitutes force. The last phrasal verb we're going to look at today is take down. This can also have a couple different meanings we're going to look at too. The first is to remove something, especially if that thing you're removing has been hanging or is just very temporary. Let's look at an example of that. We should take down the tent before we make breakfast. So maybe somebody who's been camping, right, staying outside for a night or two or more, and they're saying, okay, it's time to pack up. Let's remove the tent before we do this other activity. Should take down is an example of a modal where we're giving advice. The second way to use take down is to mean to write or record. So this kind of ties back to the second definition we looked at earlier in the video. An example of this, please take down my number and call me back. So again, they're asking someone to write their phone number down and then return a call. This is an example of an imperative or a command. So we're telling someone to do something. Of course, we've softened it, we've made it a bit nicer by using the word please. Now let's spend just a couple minutes looking at some words and phrases that are related to our verb take. The first word we're going to look at is the noun caretaker. This can be a person who is employed to look after or provide care for people, pets, or even spaces. Let's look at an example sentence. They've employed a live-in caretaker since their mom suffered a stroke. So, what this sentence is suggesting, they've asked a person to come work and provide care for someone who maybe has difficulty moving or difficulty speaking, difficulty taking care of themselves after this medical event of a stroke. And the person lives in their home. A second noun you might hear is undertaker. This is a person whose business is to work with the deceased and prepare their bodies either for burial or cremation. They might also be involved in holding visitations, funerals, other rituals that are common as we mourn the loss of someone. An example of this: undertakers around the world have struggled throughout the pandemic. I've watched a few news-related stories about this, and it always kind of breaks my heart to see how stressful and difficult their jobs have been because there has been so much more death than normal due to COVID-19. The next phrase we're going to look at is to have what it takes. This means someone has certain necessary qualities that are needed in order to succeed. An example of this phrase in a sentence: do you think she has what it takes to run her own business? So starting your own business is a large endeavor. It can be very challenging. And so with this question, someone's wondering, does this person have the needed qualities in order to be successful? The last phrase we're going to look at today is to take a seat. And this is just another way to say sit down. So as you enter a place, someone might say, please take a seat. And they're just encouraging you to sit. There might be a designated area. You can watch kind of how they're gesturing you, or you might be able to pick any seat that is available. Thanks so much for watching part 2 of the video. I hope you'll tune in for parts 3 and 4 later this week. Have a great day.